Roll call.
Yes, thank you. Vice Chair Stella Lopez.
Here.
Erin Denham.
Here.
Bonnie Burr.
Here.
Okay, Eric Clemens gave notice that he would be absent from the meeting today. Karen DeVos.
I'm on. Here.
Thank you. Elwood Exley.
Here.
Crew.
Here.
Oloda Ransko. I see her. Okay. She waves. She's on. Malia Seavey.
Here.
Robert Trefry.
Here.
Thank you. That concludes the attendance roll call.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you so much. Thank you to the members who are able to be here in presence, and thank you also to all the attending the web. I appreciate all you being here, and Alice, I understand we have a quorum, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Regarding public participation, we received 3 statements from Jane Gandhi, Marie Mulready, and Chris Drury, and my understanding is we're going to have 2 of those that send letters provide public testimony. So let's start with Anne-Marie or Dr. Anne-Marie Mulready.
Go ahead, Anne-Marie.
Good morning, members of the Connecticut State Board of Education. I am Dr. Anne-Marie Mulready, and I represent the Connecticut Association of Reading Research. I am here to draw your attention to an issue with HB 6620, an act concerning the right to read and addressing certain opportunity gaps. The bill defines reading as, quote, evidence-based instruction that focuses on competency in the 5 areas of reading, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary development, and fluency, including oral skills and reading comprehension, unquote. This definition is seriously problematic in that it subordinates comprehension to fluency. Furthermore, fluency is used twice in the definition, which suggests it is the paramount objective of reading instruction. As literacy teachers, consultants, professors, and administrators, we know the overarching goal of reading is the deep comprehension of text. Fluency is one outcome of good comprehension, but fluency in and of itself is not comprehension, as evidenced by those students identified as word callers who read short assessment passages fluently with little or no ability to answer related questions or summarize text. Ironically, this definition moves away from the work of the National Reading Panel Report of 2000 and Connecticut Public Act 12-116. In those iterations, comprehension was at least equivalent to the instructional areas. But most importantly, defining reading in this way ignores the 2020 publication of the National Academy of Education's work, Reaping the Rewards of Reading for Understanding. This analysis was substantially funded by grants from the United States Department of Education Institute of Educational Science. Thus, at this point in time, any prescriptive or proscriptive curriculum directives that are developed without substantial knowledge of this decade-long study of comprehension are based on a very incomplete knowledge base. Again, the state is creating a scenario whereby districts will be flooded by vendors with costly materials and formative testing that purport alignment with a mandated literacy standard, but show no evidence of the actual impact on student outcomes. As with previous mandates, the skills easiest to test and teach are at the forefront. HB 6620 relies on conceptions that are now decades old and that engendered a cadre of practices and assessments, including teacher certification requirements in literacy, that were highly touted almost 2 decades ago as the answer to closing the achievement gap. While some progress has been made, Growth toward that goal has been agonizingly slow, and this year's loss of school time is now adding to the burden of accelerating academic progress in our neediest students. We have included the reference to the NAED analysis, and as with all government research, it can be downloaded for free. CAR urges that anyone in charge of children's literacy growth becomes knowledgeable regarding this important work. And we urge the Connecticut State Department of Education to communicate the grave weakness of this bill to the Education Committee of the General Assembly. We thank you for your time and hope that you seriously consider what we have presented.
Thank you so much. The next presenter is Chris Drury.
I hope everyone can hear me okay. I believe I've unmuted myself.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, good morning and thank you for the opportunity to provide comments to the State Board of Education. My name is Chris Drury and I'm the current treasurer of the Connecticut chapter of the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. I'm also the Associate Dean of the School of Education and Professional Studies at Eastern Connecticut State University. The AACT Connecticut is an association of 12 public and private colleges and universities that provide educator preparation programs to students interested in the education profession. We promote and strongly support high-quality teaching and education in the state schools and are advocates for robust educational leadership. On behalf of the AACT Connecticut, we want to say thanks to the Board of Education and the Department of Education, especially to those individuals with whom our group works with frequently. As we all know, COVID continues to impact all of us, and the AACT member institutions, collectively and individually, are continuing to do their best to ensure that educator preparation programs are preparing their undergraduate and graduate students to become outstanding future teachers and educational leaders here in Connecticut. We would also like to acknowledge that we share the financial concerns that were raised in the recent bill concerning the development of a new pre-service performance assessment. That's Senate Bill 1035. While managing standard tuition and fees proves challenging for most students, our teacher candidates bear an additional burden based on the licensure assessments and testing measures required for obtaining an initial educator certificate. While these measures are in place to ensure that quality educators are emerging from our programs, they put an additional burden on these students. The costs associated with licensure include, but are not limited to, basic skills assessments, culminating content assessments, state certification application fees, background checks and fingerprinting, and EdTPA portfolio submission. While these costs can average nearly $1,000 per student at a minimum, these fees are not limited to one-time payments. Retesting and resubmission can mean individual students are paying far more than those estimated minimum costs. Progress has been made in alleviating costs, especially in the areas of fingerprinting and background check fees. With continued progress in mind, AACT Connecticut would like to invite the Board of Education to collaborate on strategies for reducing these costs and to help support our teacher candidates who are most in need of financial assistance. The EPPs currently work to raise awareness among students of funding opportunities available through generous support at the local, state, and national levels. These include, but are not limited to, Praxis retake waiver codes, EdTPA submission vouchers, State of Connecticut Minority Teacher Incentive Program scholarships, Teach grants, private scholarships and grants, and internships, assistantships, and residency positions. While these resources have been a tremendous asset for our students, we plan to continue to seek ways to eliminate the additional burden placed on teacher candidates and to make careers in education more accessible. Now, more than ever, we need to find ways to get skilled, passionate teacher candidates into our classrooms. We suggest a meeting between the AACTE Connecticut and Board of Education leaderships to further discuss this issue. As an organization, we want to continue working together with the Department of Education, the board, and the various educational stakeholders, such as the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, and other organizations where appropriate. Please continue to feel free to reach out to our association on issues of mutual interest. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board.
Thank you so much. We move to the next item on the agenda. There is no executive session, so we are in the approval of the minutes. And there are two sets of minutes. The first one are the March 3rd minutes of the State Board. So I would need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments or, corrections or anything? Then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any objection? Any abstention? Thank you. And then we have, the minutes of the board retreat of March 26th. So I will need another motion. Hello?
Second.
Thank you. Any comments or corrections? Then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions? Thank you so much. And we go now to Commissioner Russell Tucker. Welcome again, and before you begin, thank you again for all that you do. I mean, this is extraordinary times that require extraordinary leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair and members of the board. Good morning. Great to see those in the room and also those virtually. Hope everyone's doing well. So you have the Commissioner's report in your documents that was, I think, the revision sent to you this morning, and for those of you here, you have a hard copy. But I also wanted to just highlight a few that what's written in the report to give you a kind of a flavor of some of the things that we did engage in. And first, safety of school safety is still a priority. And so we're continuing to have our weekly health and safety Tuesday meetings. We're now averaging over 600 participants every week. A combination of our superintendents, our local health officials, our school medical advisors, school nurses, school board members, policymakers, and I want to take this opportunity to thank DPH for being there every week, answering questions, taking calls. We've been joined by the Office of Early Childhood in the past few weeks when we started to work on immunizations, and also from the Office of the Governor. And I want to thank our staff members here, John Fasanelli, Attorney Myrtle, and Michelle Rosado, who every week get us moving with that weekly meeting. So I wanted to highlight that. In a joint effort, some of you, I think you all got a copy of the document that was jointly produced by DPH and our agency and approved by the Office of the Governor on finishing strong. The whole concept there, we heard from superintendents and health officials with those concerns about the change in CDC guidance and travel guidance and concerns around being able to maintain safe in-school learning. And so together we facilitated that document that we call Finish Strong. How do you take all the mitigation strategies to finish the year strong to make sure kids have as much in-person learning as possible? And so the document continues to urge individuals and organizations to take a cautious approach to planning, especially because the state is opening up and folks are really getting immunized and really excited to still use a cautious approach. And the concepts for individuals and families all have a role in protecting in-person learning for the remainder of the school year. So that is out in the field, and I've heard really positive feedback from our superintendents in sharing that as well. The other really key question coming to us is about what will graduations and proms look like as kids, as our schools are planning for these events. And so hopefully by the end of this week, we will be releasing guidance on graduations and proms through our district and to the field. Another item I wanted to lift up for you is we submitted our accountability waiver to the Department of Education to decouple our state assessment results from our state accountability system, and we were approved. So we got that approval yesterday. And I'm sharing a quote from the letter of approval that the intent of the accountability waivers is to focus on assessments to provide information to parents, educators, and the public about student performance and to help target resources and support. And so we're pleased to have gotten the waiver, and we'll certainly communicate that to the field as we move forward. I know Ajit has shared the plan for assessment this year with the board at the past meeting. The other item I want to lift up is we're in the long legislative session, and a shout out to Laura. We've been managing, I think the policy committee may have heard from her this morning, but we're monitoring, she's monitoring for us 300 bills, proposals in 19 of the 22, is it 22 committees? 26 committees, and there are education-related proposals coming out of 19 of those. So it's been a very, very busy year and so far, and a lot of the proposals are asking for more of this agency. So we continue to share our concern around our capacity, and frankly also what's necessary at the local and district level for effective implementation. So that work continues. I testified in front of committees, but also Laura's facilitating individual meetings with legislators who are really wanting to talk to us to get our thoughts and ideas about the bills in the form that they're in right now, and so we're having those conversations as well. I'm sure you all are aware that we launched the Accelerate Connecticut Education Task Force, thanks to Chris Soto, who you'll hear from a little bit later, who's been facilitating the work. We wanted to bring everyone under one big tent as we look at education recovery framework and programming to accelerate learning, as a result certainly of the pandemic, and where do we go from here to reduce our opportunity gaps and to advance equity. And there's an immediate focus on what summer is going to look like for summer learning and summer enrichment. So one of the task forces is really working very hard on that, and you'll hear more later under agency updates. The other thing that we did was to launch the SEL assessment system, and you'll learn more about that in the agency report later as well, and certainly thank the staff for moving that forward. We've talked a lot about social emotional well-being, and so this is just the next step. We also heard from districts the need for an assessment that could be easily used by educators, by teachers. And so that we launched with Aperture Education, and you'll have some more information about that later as well. The other item I wanted to highlight for you is this past Monday, we had the first meeting of a new roundtable, and this is a roundtable for special populations. We wanted to make sure that we were consistently hearing and now on a monthly basis from our partners and stakeholders focused on our students with exceptionalities. So you have the Office of the Child Advocate, the Center for Children's Advocacy. These are folks who came to the board certainly in the past. Special Education Equity for Kids. We have the Greater Hartford Legal Aid, the Connecticut Legal Services, and HAPCAM, Advocacy for Children. And the point is to bring these partners together in the same space with us, the dialogue on a monthly basis, to be able to help inform our policy development, our support and accountability. We want to hear what's working right. We want to hear what our best practices, and we also want to hear what the challenges are. So we've now established a construct, thanks to Attorney Myrtle and Brian Klimkowitz, who are kind of leading, but other staff are engaged, so we can have really dialogue on a monthly basis with that group to inform our work going forward. Emerging, that we're working on, and you got a revision based on this number for 107 million that has come to the state for K-12 testing. We're so accustomed now to saying billion instead of million. Those are the amount of dollars coming into the 107 million coming to the Department of Public Health to support comprehensive screening testing for K-12 schools. That's public and private schools beginning now and extending to the end of the school year and into the summer activities and the subsequent school year. So we don't have testing infrastructure built in Connecticut in our schools. So DPH, as you well imagine, is working very, very hard. I know Jessa and John Franzanelli is at the table. We just had a meeting this past week with Massachusetts because they've implemented this testing in schools, and so we're learning so we can get up and running. But that is a new emerging piece of work that we'll be working on as well. And then finally, the Accelerate EG, certainly working on a blueprint that we will be getting out to the field sooner rather than later. So if you look at the report that I provided, you'll see that they're meeting on the American Recovery Plan Act funding, referred to as the ARPA, and the governor has certainly convened a group of state agencies that have received this additional funds to really ensure that there's alignment to maximize the impact for the state. And there's an education pillar that's a part of that I am leading there. So we're in the same room with our other sister state agencies as we're working through how the funds will be best utilized to support education. Internally, I also wanted to draw your attention to the work we're continuing to do here this past Monday. I sent out an email to our employees here at the agency as we're standing up an employee advisory diversity committee so that we can have broadly across the agency the staff voice to bring forward matters that promote equity, diversity, and inclusion. So while we're doing a lot of work externally, certainly want to make sure that we are minding the store internally as well. And so finally, you've probably seen that we visited with the governor, Windsor High School, Deputy Commissioner Nathan. It was a great visit. It was just great to be in that space to meet the students who were there. They proudly showed off the work that's happening there, and so I'm really pleased to do that. A lot happening, really it's exciting work. Staff are working around the clock, as you can well imagine, to do all of this. I bring to you their collective effort. I'm grateful for Deputy Commissioner Naismith, who is leading the charge in a lot of these initiatives, and the leadership team and staff. And I continue to appreciate and be honored to lead this organization with really dedicated folks as we build what I call a world-class education agency. So thank you very much, and I'm hoping to answer your questions.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Commissioner? I have some, John. So anybody with any questions? First, again, this is extraordinary. We haven't missed this very difficult time of crisis. The agency has continued to provide leadership, and my thanks to you and the staff for doing all the work while you're on this staff. The question is, what do you anticipate are the biggest challenges coming your way? I imagine the distribution of funding and the use of the funding. And what else do you see as challenges that we need to be aware of?
So thank you for that question. The funding, so to be clear, the ESSER II funding that is out right now, we're getting applications in due on, I think, the 19th of this month. So that's ESSER II, that's not the new set of funding that we receive, which you'll hear more about. So we've, as you know, and Desi will also update you on the structure we've set up to monitor those. So right now, all those applications are coming in to be reviewed and approved for ESSER II. We also now, with the ARPA dollars, with the whole new construct, that was $1.1 billion that came in, and 995, I think, Kathy will share that later, has to go out to our district. So we're now working on what that will need to look like for funding support. And also we have to stand up a separate application for those new funds as well. So we have to close out the application under ESSER II and start planning toward what we can probably call ESSER III at this point in time, funding support. So again, our capacity certainly is being challenged, and we're looking to see what we can do around that. So internally, we need to work on that. The other big ticket item, which I'm sure we will be coming to you on, though there's lots of questions to superintendents about remote learning, okay, and what that will look like for the upcoming year. And so we're monitoring, Attorney Murdoch closely monitoring with Laura bills. There's one proposal around that, two proposals that's out there right now that we're monitoring, and just overall the work around what is going to happen. Some states around us have said, is it New Jersey, I think in Massachusetts, have said business as usual, when the fall comes. The best place for students is in class in front of teachers. And so that is a question that we're needing to answer sooner rather than later, and we're hearing that from our district.
Thank you so much. Is there any way that we can provide support that you need in addition to just saying? I appreciate Peter sends emails, Laura sends emails and keeps us informed. I think we do get the information. But is there anything, and I think I will not raise your hand and then Karen, anything that you require from us at this, again, challenging times that we need to be aware of?
So another good question, Vice Chair Lopez, and as we go through seeking your counsel and guidance on some of these big issues really is important so that we are in step with the collective wisdom of the board. As we've done that under assessment, for example, and shared with you what the issues are to get your feedback. So continuing to do that, I think is really important as we continue to execute the board's plan.
Thank you. You know you have our support. I think I will that, and then Karen. She's muted. I will let start again. She can
Yeah,
muted. I will not mute it, sorry, this thing.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Estella and everyone. Charlene, you mentioned about graduation and proms. What does that look like? Can you just give us some specific as to what's going to happen? Because I know this is very significant for families and our students.
Thank you for the question. So the issue is developing guidance that districts can use to do this as safe as possible in terms of gathering, being indoors, being outdoors, and what some of the precautions are as planning is taking place. So that's what the guidance document will provide, that level of information to districts as they go forward and do their planning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm hoping that the communication is sent in a timely fashion to our families, right, in the schools, so they can prepare, just like so many other institutions are doing. Is that right, Charlene?
That's correct. So we're right now in the approval phase of the document that we've drafted jointly with the Department of Public Health.
Okay. Thank you, Charlene.
You're welcome.
Karen, go ahead, please.
Hi, good morning. I'm beginning to hear more and more concerns at the local level about the number of educator vacancies that are occurring, and wondering if that is a issue that many districts are facing. Anything that the State Department is thinking about around that might be helpful and supportive to local districts.
Thank you, Dr. DeVos-Watson. I know that there's some concerns, and maybe I see if I don't know, Shawana should be on here as well. I know that there's some immediate concerns even around summer and summer education and what we need to do around staffing in that space. And I know some of them are looking at our next gen students as well that they're utilizing. Shawana, would you like to add to that?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, board members. We have been in touch with several HR directors from various districts, and we've held a couple of focus groups on this topic to kind of see, this was in January, February, where they are with their current vacancies, what they think their potential vacancies might be, and there is some concern around staffing shortages. We've also been in touch with TRB, and we're hoping to get numbers probably this month or early May to see where the retirements are coming in, but we are working very closely. I already have districts that have requested next generation students to work with their districts during the summer with their summer programming and learning loss. The only issue that we're facing now is almost running into a shortage of students at the universities in our EPP programs. For example, I have one district right now that has requested 15 students to start within the next 3 weeks, and they want to continue those students working throughout the summer. And right now, I only have about 4 students who can meet that number of 15, and I've reached out to 3 universities. So we are really trying to pull students from a variety of institutions, and I've been meeting with other institutions to onboard them as well. For the program to see if they have students that would be available to work. So we're really trying a variety of resources to assist our districts with the staffing shortages that they are potentially facing.
So we have the short term, while we've not lost sight of our long term initiatives around the diversification of our workforce. and those efforts are certainly continuing. So thank you for lifting that up for us.
Thank you. Any other questions for Commissioner Russell? Again, thank you so much, and we truly appreciate all the work that is being done by you and your staff. It's very difficult time. The next item is the report of the chair, and I do have, although I'm vice chair, I do have a report. You may be aware that Alan Taylor has stepped down as chair of the board. He's hoping to join the board as a board member, but that has not been confirmed yet. I'm acting today as the vice chair. I'm leading the board, and we hope that the governor will select a chair shortly. We don't know who that person will be. It will not be me. You don't have to speculate. It will not be me. So that's an easy one. But I wanted, and I asked Alan to join the meeting. I don't know if he's hearing, but I wanted to recognize Alan because in looking at his legacy, you may not be aware that he was appointed chair in 2005. So he's been chair of this board for 16 years. He was appointed a board member in 1995. So he's been a board member for many years, over 20 years. And he's been chair with many commissioners, and I listed all of them. I went, did my research, Google, and found out that he was first appointed when Betty Sternberg became commissioner. Then you have Mark McQuillan, then George Coleman, Stephen Pryor, Diana Wenzel, Miguel Cardona, and Charlene Rosenthal. So that's the list of the commissioners he's worked with. But you need to think about a number of things. You need to think about the fact that this is a board under Alan's leadership that really addresses policy and strategic thinking. That is not a board that manages or intends to manage the department. It is a board, again, that looks and tries to establish a direction, goals, and then evaluate those results. And that's part of the leadership that the board provides and the chair provides. I think when Dr. Cardona was elected as commissioner, as Secretary of Education, it was because of his leadership qualities, but it was also a recognition that Connecticut has a very a good education system, although we all know it is improvement, although we all know that there are achievement gaps, although we all know there are ways that need to be addressed and make it better, it's still recognized as a good system in the nation that could provide leadership throughout the nation to every other state. When Commissioner Charlene Russell took over, she did not miss a step, as we have said, and that's a recognition again of the department, of the leadership of here at the state level, and so on and so forth. All that has been part of the work of the board, the department, and the legacy of Alan Taylor. He and I sometimes saw things from a very different perspective, and he never felt that was not a good idea. I think he welcomed different opinions, and we were able to talk frankly with him about those issues that we would not agree with him. I think we need to honor him in a very different way. I think this is not enough. I believe that in honoring somebody's legacy of that many years, we also recognize ourselves. There's a Cuban writer that is sort of one of the best known in Cuba that says, honrar, honra. When you honor yourself. And there's been many board members that have served with Alan and helped him and helped the department move forward. One of the things that I know happened during his term is the approval of the Common Core. And I wasn't here, but I understand that was a very difficult endeavor, and that wasn't easy to do, and it created challenges. And again, he was able to work with them. So I wanted to let you know, I wanted to acknowledge that and make you aware that of the changes in the board, and that probably by the next meeting we will have a new chair. The governor will be selected. The chair is selected by the governor. The vice chair is selected by all of you. So it's a very different situation. And again, I want to thank all of you for the work that you do, and in many ways also for being, although we do have different perspectives, a coherent body that thinks about policy, strategy, and then evaluation of results, and how to help the department to move forward and provide leadership. So thank you so much. I don't know if you have any questions regarding what I said.
Thank you for the summary.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I do hope, again, I believe in doing things in person, so I do hope maybe in summertime we can get together and recognize that and acknowledge his many years of service to the as chair of the board. He started as chair of, I believe, in Hartford Board of Education.
Yes, he did.
So he's really, I think his wife is a teacher, his daughter is a teacher.
Yep.
And his daughter is going to Hartford Public Schools. So he's committed to the system where he has served. And as we know, also he brought his legal mind to reading the materials and applying his legal perspective to the work of his body. So again, thank you so much. So if you have any questions, no questions, I mean, this is like a classroom. You're supposed to wait about 30 seconds before you, right? I mean, it looks endless, 30 seconds is endless, but you're supposed to wait because people have to think. If they have the question before you wait, it means that they were not paying attention. Right, Erin?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Pirouette, roger that.
Exactly. So
Wait.
Maria has a question. I gave her to speak. Go ahead, Maria.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to thank you for the summary and thank Alan for his time on the board. I just wanted to say that now and not just for the summer or whenever we were able to get together to celebrate his time with us. So just wanted to thank you. Thank you for the words on his behalf.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. And I do promise, I do know my role as social director, but I promise I'll organize something we're able to do. I need to say that. I'll be very glad to do it. Anyway, thank you again, and I think to move to the next topic, financial matters. No financial matters, okay. And then we have consent agenda. So I will need a motion to the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or any? Then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that's approved. And then we the CAPS blueprint, which is from Connecticut Public Schools, with Frank Rabinow.
She's coming on live.
I am joining.
Seems like it's going to be trying person. Not on.
Ajit, is Fran on?
Yes, both Fran and Paul have been promoted to panelists, so they can share their videos and unmute and present. I'll bring up the PowerPoint momentarily.
Okay,
Thank you. I can see Frank's glasses.
Yeah, Fran.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for taking the time to meet with both myself and Paul Freeman, who is also with me. He is president of CAPS and superintendent of the year. And as you know, I serve as the executive director of CAPS. I've been in that position for 3 years and some months. And I just want to give you a little bit of my background before I begin to talk to you about the plan. I was at the State Department of Education for almost 7 years as a bureau chief for curriculum and as associate commissioner. Some of the best years of my career. Very talented people and very, very hardworking. I always tell people I never worked harder than I did at the State Department. And I also spent the majority of my career in Bridgeport, and I was interim superintendent there for 3 years, as well as superintendent in Hamden for 7 years. I thought that when I left Bridgeport, I retired, but it wasn't to be. I came back and went to CAPS and have immensely enjoyed the position at CAPS. And I will say, I want to just thank Charlene because I feel a wonderful relationship and partnership with Charlene and Desi and many of the people at the State Department of Education. We work very closely together. So with that said, I would now like to give you some high points along with Paul, high points of our plan. So let me begin and give you a little bit of history on the blueprint to transform Connecticut's public schools. We have been working on this for almost 3 years. It has taken incredible amounts of hours, etc. And let me just tell you how it began. I approached Ted Sergi. Some of you may remember Ted as a former commissioner. 3 years ago to say that we had just come off the CJEF case and the present ECS formula was in operation at that time. It was the summer of 2018. And I felt strongly that we needed to really look at ECS funding and where that ECS funding was going. And so I asked Ted to help me, to help CAPS with that job. I also asked Kathy Gay, who was a retired officer from OPM. And I can only tell you that when I was at the State Department of Education, in helping Betty Sternberg prepare the budget, I never prepared more than I prepared for Kathy Gay because she knew every line item in the entire education budget. And so Kathy agreed to work with us. And what has grown and developed is something I did not see coming. I was thinking ECS, period. But when we began the work, and when we began with work with the board at CAPS, we realized that we have for too many years looked at ECS in a silo, a kind of funding by itself and a rundown of what districts were getting. And what we have found is superintendents or legislators bought into the ECS or didn't, dependent upon how their district did. And so we decided that we wanted something different. And what was born was the Blueprint for Connecticut Public Schools. It's comprehensive, it's long-term, it's a 15-year plan. It is predictable and sustainable. It has, if I can say, the consensus of all of the superintendents in Connecticut. I don't remember a time, to be honest with you, when superintendents came together around a plan that they all believed would help the students of Connecticut to move forward. I would say that that has taken a great deal of work on the part of the board and myself and going out and Paul to area groups and talking to them about the plan. But it does have the full consensus, and that's a lot of power behind it. So let me talk to you a bit about some of the large pieces in the plan. I'll give you an overall view, and I'll be certainly happy to answer any questions, as will Paul. Can I have the next slide, please? So I understand where the State Department of Education is on funding, and but I want to present to you what the ECS funding actually, what we believe needs to happen in the funding. ECS funding has been the same for 30 years. And what I mean by that, the share of the funding for education, which is right now around 41%, it's gone between 39 and 41% for the past 30 years. Most states are at sharing, an equal sharing of 50%, okay, or half and half. What this plan aspires to is an equal sharing of 47% overall on the part of the state and 47% on the part of the districts. We understand that that is differentiated according to need, and 6% coming from the federal government. And we are saying it's time to stop robbing Peter to pay Paul, which is what happens often. And we're saying we need a 15-year plan to increase ECS funding by 2.5% each year for 15 years to get to an equal sharing of the cost of education in the state. Now, here, if anything, when we go out and present this, we have full support of so many people, legislators, CABE, CAS, all of them, even the teacher unions. But what they say is it's not aggressive enough. We should have asked for more dollars. But, we've been around for a while, myself, Ted Sergi, Kathy Gay, and we wanted something that was aspirational, but also realistic. We understand there isn't $400 million in 1 year. And so we wanted to space it out and move it forward. And certainly if there were more dollars, that would be wonderful. Can I have the next slide, please? I think I did take this and say to you that we believe from a statewide perspective, it's the differences in net current expenditures per pupil by school district that should be the priority concern, the net current expenditures. And we do believe that we need to certainly spend the dollars on those with the greatest need. And an improved ECS formula would be the major vehicle that the state has for meeting this state constitutional blueprint. And state constitutional mandate. We believe that ECS should no longer be considered in a silo. We have looked at it with grants. We have looked at it with programming. We've looked at it with accountability and with aspirations for the next 15 years. And the reason that I was so thrilled that Charlene allowed me to come today to talk about this is I know you're on the brink of creating a strategic plan. We're hopeful that you can use this as a foundation and build on it to create your own plan. It's 3 years in the making, and it really addresses what we consider to be the major issues across the state. Next slide, please. And as I said, it's a 15-year roadmap. I believe I sent you all a link to the plan. I also delivered hard copies to the State Department of Education for each of you. And it is, it's 30 recommendations. So it can look overwhelming at first, but remember, it's 15 years and it should be viewed collectively as like a huge puzzle of interlocking pieces. What we're worried about is people grabbing recommendation 26 or 21 and not looking at the plan holistically, because all of the parts of the plan work together. Now, I'm not going to go through every recommendation with you, but I want to take you through a few. The next slide, please. So we do start with special education, and we do believe that for 20 years, the excess cost grant has not been fully funded. It's been, you know, around 70%, 75%, whatever could the state could afford at the time. But we believe that many issues would be solved if it were fully funded. And I would also tell you that I sit in Rosa DeLaura's kitchen cabinet, and I'm also working with the federal delegation on that, because the feds, when they put forward IDEA in the late 70s, promised a 40% funding of special ed. They're at about 14%. So we're looking to the feds as well. We are also looking at special education, and we're saying, my goodness, we're all for every child receiving everything that they need in a program. But the rates of special ed have risen exponentially since 2011. We are somewhere around 16 to 17% on average now. And in 2011, we were at 11%. Why are they rising? I have my own thoughts on this. In being in Bridgeport, there wasn't the RTI, the response to intervention, in the way that it needed to happen prior to identification for special ed, because I didn't have the resources to employ the interventionists and reading teachers that were needed in order to remediate some of the issues that the students had prior to their being identified. At the time of CJEF, my budget of $280,000 at the time in Bridgeport, 25% of that was being used for special ed. I know now that in Hartford, 1/3 of the general budget is special ed. What we're saying is we need to take a look at that, and we need, you know, certainly to give every child whatever they need, but let's look at how well are we intervening prior to special ed. We also say that we need to look at incentives to, if we do identify that students as special ed, how do we keep them within the district or within the RESCs, rather than out to private facilities that can cost well over $100,000? Are there ways that we can incentivize the RESCs also to come up with cutting edge programs? Some have for autism. I would like to see it happen, frankly, for intervention, short-term intervention for trauma, and I can go into greater detail in that. For English language learners, we believe that there should be plans for English language learners, and we're asking for more funding for a couple of things, to move these plans forward, to also do more research on what works best for English language learners. How do we best work with them most effectively? And we were thinking things like at the high school level, if you have English learners coming in, wouldn't it be a great addition to have some technology that translated the content of some of the academic courses into their native language while they're learning English. And that technology exists. Could we incorporate that in at the high school? And next slide. We're saying you can't do this immediately, but we're saying, you know, President Biden has talked about universal early childhood access for all underserved 3 and 4-year-olds. Could we aspire to that and say, yes, we absolutely need that to happen? And could we do a asset mapping of what would be needed for us to make sure we had those slots for every child? And I say that because when I was in Bridgeport, I only had 2/3 of my students attending preschool. And so I thought the need was slots. And I did asset mapping and found out that I actually had enough for 94% of the students, but sometimes they weren't in the right neighborhoods or they didn't have transportation for the parents to access them. And I think we need to do more in that area. We also feel strongly we certainly don't want young children sitting behind desks at 3 years old, but we do believe that we need to build the early reading success strategies, oral language, etc., background information at a very early age. We talk about attacking structural racism and discrimination and directly addressing structural racism and other forms of discrimination, adopting practices that promote diversity, examine and act upon data. I know that we collect all of the data in enrollment in higher level courses. The state does a great job of that, special ed rates, discipline patterns, retention, but how do we actualize it? How do we actually have a program that addresses all of those issues? Rather than admiring the problem, how do we act upon the problem? We also ask for new state funds for minority teacher recruitment. We think the CREC program that has now gone statewide is a wonderful example, and a great time to push that program is right now to build the capacity of your district with the federal funding. Also in this is early reading success. I really absolutely would love to see us go on a statewide training program for the science of reading, incorporating all of the components of reading within the Department of Education and for pre-service. Frankly, I had too many teachers that arrived in my district in Bridgeport in particular that were not equipped to teach reading. They had one reading course. And I do believe that would be better reading strategies would be a deterrent to a prison pipeline. The next piece is virtual learning. I'm sorry, the next slide, Ajit, sorry about that. Improving virtual learning. And I've heard all of you, by the way, speak about all these areas so many times. So I know that it's part and parcel of what we are all thinking about. This plan just brings it together cohesively, I think. We're saying we have to rethink virtual learning by radically improving the technology, content, and use, and create standards for virtual learning. We know, pandemic or not, we have learned the value of virtual learning, and we do believe it needs to move forward and be part of every curriculum ongoing. We also look to the state for leadership in curriculum and instruction. We take direction from the state Department of Education, and we believe in their ability to advance 21st century learning skills, collaboration, problem solving, portrait of the graduate, and we would love to see model curricula and materials. coming forward so that every district doesn't spend inordinate amount of time and dollars creating their own curriculum when we all have the same standards. And I'm saying model, I'm not saying mandated. The next page, please. We are certainly looking at student well-being, and I know this is close to Charlene's heart. New state aid for student safety, trauma, mental health, and well-being. I absolutely believe that every district should have an SE, a social and emotional learning program and training for all of their stakeholders. You know, in Bridgeport and in Hamden, we had the Ruler program. We brought it out to the community, and I would say to you, it was a wonderful foundation for academic learning. SEL is germane to moving forward academically. Teacher certification, development, and evaluation. Thankfully, I worked very closely with Shawana Tucker and Chris Todd, and in talking about how we can upgrade and remove any barriers, eliminate any barriers to teacher certification. Some new regional prep programs, you know, like I'm thinking right now, frankly, of the federal dollars that are there. I'm thinking of building the capacity of the districts. Could we cross-certify some of our teachers in reading and in special ed, whether and have the districts pay for some of this? Could they do that in, you know, and because there's such shortages in that area. And even if they don't become special ed teachers or reading teachers, they will have greater skills at the elementary level or high school level. So we're pushing for that. We're also working very closely with the talent office on redoing teacher evaluation. And I know you know that, and we're working with the unions on that as well. And I look forward to a much more relevant program in teacher eval. The next page, and I'm only hitting on some of the 30, and I promise I'm almost done. I know you have lots of things on your agenda, and I can give you a more thorough piece of all of the recommendations, but we are looking at regional efficiencies, and we're encouraging funding to the RESCs to facilitate the regionalization of services, especially in the area of special ed. And I could go into great detail with that. We're also looking at the School District Improvement Grant, and I work closely with DESI as well. And I just think that we could merge, as a former Alliance District person, we could merge a lot of those grants. You know, a lot of the smaller grants for before school, after school, you know, Commissioner Network, all of those, could we somehow put them together into one grant and have districts apply for one grant to use those dollars in the way they see fit? And certainly we're looking for higher and stronger accountability measures around that. I could go into detail. There are 3 or 4 recommendations around that as well. So that's high level. It's a really, I think it's a well done plan. I can say that because I didn't do it, guys. It was done by the collaborative, by the board, spending hours at every board meeting with Ted Sergi and Kathy Gay's facilitation. It's a plan that every superintendent knows and every superintendent subscribes to. And so we would love it if you would consider it in your, as you move forward with your strategic plan. All this work has been done, and we just think that, you know, we're not territorial. We don't want to hold on to the plan. We want it to move forward with a very influential group, which the State Board of Ed is. So Thank you very much. And Paul, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything.
I do. I didn't want to interrupt. Fran has done this presentation 100 times around the state at this point, and she does it incredibly well. As we have taken this out to our members, as we have talked around the state about this, I think what people are most excited about is that, you know, districts look at one-year budgets. The state looks at a biennial budget, and we get caught in the trap of thinking of funding in 1 and 2 year cycles. We think of different components and we disaggregate and try to solve individual problems. And this doesn't do that. This looks at funding long term. ECS is definitely the foundation of this plan, but ECS sits within an environment of all of these other factors that impact our towns and our schools and our children. And we really tried hard to consider all of those things collectively. The ECS proposal that we make here eliminates loser districts. It invests in all the children of Connecticut, and it doesn't ask any communities to move backwards in their ECS funding. Again, that's achieved over 15 years, but it also does it in this holistic environment. We really are proud of the work, and we humbly ask you to take a look at it. Fran and I can go through all 30 of the recommendations individually with you, but we really are excited about the opportunity that this can become, that this can inform your work on a strategic plan and a long-range plan and a holistic plan moving forward. And we really do appreciate your time this morning. We know it's a lot to digest. We've given you just the highest level overview, but we're happy to answer any questions or come back or talk with any of you at a more detailed level.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask the board members if they have questions. I have a number of things, so I truly appreciate your presenting these and in very timely fashion and all the work that has been done. So, anybody has questions? Well, go ahead, please.
I guess I have a few. Obviously a huge amount of work, and it really is very comprehensive as what is needed. And I think it hopefully can get a point where it could be galvanize all the communities that are concerned about education together and support the same agenda. One thing I would throw out to the commissioner is that if I read through all of the material that was sent out, and you can have questions about individual lines. What does this mean? What does that mean? And this isn't the place to do that. But maybe one of the committees could take this on as I know the department would too, to try to get underneath the hood and look at this. But one of the committees do the same thing. Maybe or a volunteer.
I was thinking the same thing.
To really understand what's there.
Right.
You can see the highlight, you see the intention, but a lot of it is in the detail of how it might work. And so you have a committee that really has a chance to do that. I'd love to be a part of that process. I guess there's, in terms of the content of the things that were mentioned, there's two things that I mentioned. One is the 2.5% is a good target in this, but in 15 years, 2.5% is going to put you way behind inflation. How does this tie into the inflationary trends? Is this 2.5% above inflation, or how does that work? Or is it just going to mean that you're just barely rearranging the dollars around if you don't really have? By that point, you really don't have any new dollars because inflation's eating up most of all this stuff. So I think that's one of the issues that we all look at. And I must admit, just out of pure bias, that the third grade reading, we need to say something about math in here. Is the math preparation for the kids. So reading is extremely important, especially third grade reading. And my bias is third grade math is just important too. The kids got to have a basic understanding of mathematics in order to be able to do well. So those are my comments.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And we can talk about it. Erin and I are going to have lunch so we can plan. But I would volunteer also because I think I would like to sort of look at this in terms of the strategic planning and what are the things, that that have been identified that are critical as we move forward. So thank you for saying that. Any other comments or questions for Fran?
I would just add really to both Bob and Stella that I can see this fitting into, getting updates through legislation, policy, and development, because I think it would fit in there. Fran, I thank you for going over this. It's such a nice, it's so nice to get a report and then to have someone who part of that report gives out the details, because it just makes a difference in handing over the report that we get many of. So I really appreciate that. And as we were going through it, I think some of my fellow board members would also agree, a lot of the conversation was very much first retreat, our first meeting talking about our 5-year plan. A lot of similarities. So I think this will be a resource that will help guide us quite a bit. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Fran.
I'm thrilled to go into more detail with you. And what I would also say is, there are some things in the plan that we're also open to thinking differently about. I went to a legislator. I didn't present it here, but we were talking about adult ed, and we were saying that one of the recommendations is perhaps adult ed could be run by the rest rather than each district having to run it. And that legislator, had some issues with that. And I said, well, we can talk about it. It's not set in cement, so to speak. And to your point about the 2.5%, you're right. What the other piece in the plan is that the foundation has to increase over the 15 years. Right now, the foundation is incredibly important. Right now, your foundation sits at about 11,000 plus. There's no rhyme or reason for that. The average cost of educating a child with special ed in there is somewhere around 18,000 right now, and probably we should be looking at a foundation, minus special ed, at somewhere around 16,000. But that would be astronomical to put in all at once. But I think the foundation needs to increase along with the 2.5% every year.
Thank you. I think I will let you have your hand up. You want to maybe go ahead, please.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes. Perfect. Okay. So, Fran, I enjoyed reading the document. So it was nicely done. It was very detailed, but at the same time too, it was fun reading. Okay, it wasn't a document that I felt overwhelmed and having to. But just two simple questions. So I thank you and everybody that worked on this for just kind of the. It demonstrates the commitment for our children and our families in terms of what is going on, especially before and after the pandemic. Before and after, because we still had the pandemic was still going on when it came to learning recovery. Okay? That's just so. Therefore, I have two simple observations, and that is that for the 30 recommendations, has there been discussion about how they're going to be assessed, and so that we understand that they were effective and that it impacted the work that you've put, and it's also helped successfully the students and the community and the educators.
Yes, and we have said in one of the recommendations right toward the end that we want a public hearing on the part of the state and the part of every school district, a public hearing that talks about how has the funding, if there's increased funding, how has it impacted the outcomes in each of those school districts? And we believe that needs to happen each year. And we need to be held accountable, not only as a state, but as individual districts on how we are moving that forward. So yes, we're asking for public accountability.
Yes, thank you, Fran. And then my last observation on page 11, On page 11, I noticed that there are some dates in parentheses, right? And I'll give you an example. No later than the reviewing and clarifying the state statutory provisions and state regulations by June 30th, 2022. So in reading that, are you up to par with that? Because this is next year, and that could be very intense.
Yeah, and I mean, those are some of the things that we need to change. But, you know, to be honest with you, we had the statutory provisions and regulations. When I was associate commissioner, certification fell under my my area of supervision. We had regs and changes ready to go. That was probably in 2005. And they have not moved forward as a full change in regulations since then. We've tinkered with some of them, but the full has not moved forward. That may be too aggressive, and we can look at that. But we
every
do
blueprint
need change.
experience is change orders.
Yeah.
I mean, we bring this forward knowing that there will be conversation and that there may be some change orders attached to this blueprint. And we look forward to having those conversations and making those adjustments along the way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you so much, Fran. And all of you.
It really was. It was a pleasure to work with Ted Sergi and Kathy Gay, who really have a good handle on what can and can't be done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Maria, have you had enough before? No? Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Shirley, please go ahead. Thank you, Vice Chair. And Fran and Paul, thank you very much for coming to share the report with us. And thank you for always reaffirming our partnership, which is really so important. And also, certainly willing to, with Erin, with the committee, as you're talking about it, to also share some of the strides that we're making under these areas of work as well, so that can inform the path going forward. Because I think it's important that you see where we are. We're not literally out of step in some of these areas, and are indeed beginning to work through in some of these. So I think it's important. No, that would be great. Thank you, Shani. Fran, thank you again for this presentation. I appreciate getting it beforehand so I could read it. And I have a question. I'm delighted to see that you guys are so action-oriented, that this is really an action plan. This is very concrete. These are the steps, like a roadmap. But I need to visualize. I need to sort of challenge you and tell me, when you talk about transformation, how does this anticipate, perceive, visualize schools being transformed? What would be different? 15 years from now, what would a school look like? I want to see that image that, in strategic plan, you always start with your vision. So what would be the vision of the school if we did all this? And again, to me, this is a result of people who want to do things, action plan, concrete, moving forward. I'm reviewing this, but I need that visual image to really help me, because as we think of a strategic plan for the department, for the state, we want to have that visual image. So I want you to contribute to creating that image for all of us.
Yes, I think creating that image together is so important. And we did realize as we went through it, a couple of the superintendents made us very aware that we didn't have enough in there on innovation. So we added a whole piece on innovation to the report, and said we would be more than willing to chair a committee that looked at the future and what schools could look like. So that's a great point.
Estella,
we can do that.
Estella, if I may, Estella, can I just add something to what Fran?
Sure.
Yeah, and sure, I promise you to the point. One of the other things is, and Fran and Paul, you please correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But I noticed that also the innovation, but in addition to parental engagement, okay? I didn't see a lot of parental engagement in this document. tied in with all of the recommendations. I did see some, you mentioned parents in some of the student disability, but I want parents to be more engaged and more involved now with all this new technology, like Fran, you mentioned, it's beautiful, especially with the English as second learners. Okay?
I think you raised a
So with all
really,
respect, okay, I just wanted to.
I think you raised a really legitimate concern, and I agree with you. We probably should have emphasized family and community relationships more than we did. We just implied it. We took it for granted, but I don't think that's good enough. We probably should have stated it. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Mr. Freeman also if he had any suggestions. Again, what I'm thinking, and this is for my to help me. I don't want incremental change is wonderful, but I think I want transformational change, especially to achieve equity and to eliminate the achievement gap. So what I'm thinking is from all these things that you're proposing, which again, to me, this is how I would have done it, because I'm very action oriented and so on and so forth. But I'm thinking a little bit of inspiration in terms of looking at the school in the future. What would be different? How would they be transformed? If you could sort of talk a little bit about that, if you may, I would appreciate it.
I think it's a really helpful suggestion. I think that we could absolutely go back, take our 30 recommendations, do that visioning exercise, and create a prose description of what we expect our schools will look like in 15 years. We're going to want to talk about the equity components. We're going to want to talk about the instructional elimination of gap components. We're going to want to talk about equitable and adequate funding. We're going to want to talk about how they sit in their communities and how we interact with the parents. We're going to want to make sure that we're not silent on math and science instruction and only focus on reading and early childhood education. Again, as we brought this around, I think it's really interesting when you hear how different people approach or think about problems. Early on, as we were sharing with superintendents, they wanted to see a calendar. They wanted to know what the 15 years looked like. And so we created the visual. This is just a different way of visualizing the same plan. And I think it's a really good suggestion. And I'm sort of chomping at the bit to sit with Ted and get started on it.
Yep.
Please, I serve with Ted in another board, so I would like to see him do that work. For example, one of the challenges that the commissioner addresses today is the role of technology or distance learning. How does that fit? We know it shouldn't disappear because it has played a role, but how does it fit? How do we work with that? How do we train teachers to do it in the most appropriate manner? How do we identify students that work better using that type of technology? Is it for adult learning? I don't have the answer. What I would like is for you, the educators, to help us see these new settings that is part of the 21st century and that COVID has pushed us to face. So again, as I said, this is what I would have done exactly. I'm sort of seeking something that I would not have done, which is, the image of the transformation of the schools for the 21st century. But I appreciate any help that you can give us. I think will be welcoming, and I think that's what we do want in our strategic plan to send to Connecticut a perspective of the school setting that is truly transformational and includes and eliminates the achievement gap. So thank you for the incredible work that you're doing.
If I could just say, our thing is the power of a plan that we could all buy into. And, honestly, we're open to any negotiation around these recommendations. But could you imagine if the governor's office, the State Board of Ed, the legislature, we were all working together on a long-term plan? I mean, if you look at many or most of the bills that are coming forward in the legislature, many of them are already contained in the plan. But, Massachusetts has a plan. I think an overarching plan that we were all chipping away with every year would be an incredibly powerful tool to move education forward in the state for all kids.
I totally agree, and I think, as you have heard, our commissioner say that, she fully intends to continue to collaborate and be your partner in this endeavor. It's important for us to have your organization and the superintendent be working with us handling that. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for all the work for presenting this document. So, any other questions or comments before we move on? Thank you again. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your time
Thank
this
you for
morning.
your time.
Thank you. Very good. Very good. Charlene, agency of, I hated to ask them that question, but I needed a Charlene, agency update.
Thank you very much. And Ajit, I know you have a deck, a PowerPoint deck. So this is where we're updating you, giving you some further details around agency efforts. And you can go to the second slide, Ajit. I know the first one is on our Accelerate CT. I'm checking to see, I know Chris joined us, but if you go to the next slide, I want Kathy to update the board on, you can go to the next one. Kathy can update the board next. Okay, that's it. So I've talked about the ESSER 2 funding. I know this is a new pot of money that we've received, and Kathy, are you available just to give an overview of where we are?
Can you hear me?
Too much.
Good morning, Vice Chair Lopez and board members, Commissioner. As the Commissioner was saying, we received notification a couple of weeks ago that Connecticut was going to get $1.1 billion in funding under the American Rescue Plan, which we're calling this program ARP ESSER instead of ESSER 3. I don't know if we're going to keep track of all of these. But as part of this funding, what is different than ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 is that the federal law actually reserves portions of funding for certain activities. And so as you can see on the slide, we are able to withhold 10% of the $1 billion for state level activities. We have to reserve out of the entire pool of funds at least 5% to address learning loss. So that is the $55 million figure. We then have to reserve at least 1% of the entire pool of funds for both summer enrichment programming and after school programming. So those are the two $11 million figures you see on the slide. We then are able to thankfully take 2.5% for administrative set aside, which is going to allow us to hire some durational staff to assist the department in rolling out all of these things. And Charlene can speak to that more. And then, I'm sorry, that's the 5% for SEA administration. And then we have a pool of $27.6 million available for other activities that we identify as potentially being available for closing gaps in funding that our districts are experiencing. So $995 million is to go directly to the districts. It is based again off of their Title I allocation. So our office has just completed that calculation and it's under review right now. However, the USED only released 2/3 of the funding to us. So the 2/3 of the funding, which is a little over $700 million, is available for us to begin using now. In order to access the remaining 1/3, the as the department has to develop a plan and then fill out an application to access those funds. We are still awaiting guidance from USED, which is supposed to be coming shortly, on what our plan needs to include and what the application itself will involve. So that will be kind of a stay tuned thing. Another important thing about these funds is that the LEAs, out of their allocation, need to reserve at least 20% of the funds to address learning recovery. So again, unlike ESSER 1 and 2, where there weren't specific set-asides, under ARP ESSER, we do have specific activities that we need to address. In the coming weeks, we will be developing the ARP ESSER application for districts. As the commissioner said, they're currently in the middle of completing their ESSER 2 applications, which are due to us April 19th. And so we are trying to figure out what is the most efficient way to create an application that they can, that doesn't for ARP ESSER, that doesn't overwhelm them, and probably builds upon the activities that they are completing right now for their ESSER 2 application. So that work is underway. The final thing that I'll say is there's also a timeline to this. So for the 2/3 of the funding that we received, there is a 60-day timeline for us to make those funds available to the LEAs. So we will be moving quickly. And Commissioner, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Kathy. Are there questions for Kathy on the funding? As you can see, there are lots of resources there that we have to move. Preliminary calculation, I think the district could get up to $100 million for the work to be done. So resources there, but again, planning has to be done around it. And as Kathy mentioned, they're knee deep right now in the planning for using the ESSER 2 fund. So part of it, we don't want them to spend the entire next few months just doing that planning and submission, but that is required. So we're having to manage that so that they can be efficient in the work that they need to get done. But as you see, challenge, Kathy, we have to look at the capacity in the fiscal office because we're now increasing the amount of funding and calculation and all of that has to go out of that office. And frankly, our own oversight and management of grant of the applications and all of that. So we're really looking at our own capacity, as Kathy mentioned, in this space. Question here. Go ahead.
Is it, the funding is all one-time spending? I mean, this grant goes away, obviously.
That's correct.
How do you manage that where people are going to want to, it's a natural intention, or it would be a natural thing to say, well, I'm going to use this for something and I hope I get more later.
Right. Yeah, that is a part of the conversations that we're having. And Kathy, I don't know if you can speak more. I know that. Yeah, go ahead.
So we've been doing a lot of technical assistance with the districts, with both the superintendents and the school business officials, discussing with them about that to the extent that they are supplementing staff, in order to reduce class sizes to provide more intensive tutoring type services for recovery, that they have to be mindful that those funds will not be available in 2 years. And so that the activities that they're choosing to do need to be somewhat time limited for some of them, or building capacity that they are now planning for how they'll resource after these funds go away. So, I mean, it's a lot of effort on their part. And, we are fortunate because Fran, the CAPS, is partnering with us in this work. So we are able to offer some additional technical assistance to the districts, but it's an excellent question, is how to navigate sustainability after these funds go away.
Commissioner, does the do the schools understand that that the State Department will be keeping 10%? They don't see it as you taking it away from them. I just want to make sure that the communication is there, so they don't see the department keeping 110 million as something that it's not, that is taking away from them.
No. Thank you. So the communication that we put out, we haven't put any out on this one yet, but even the previous one, we've clearly identified what the act requires and allows for the set aside for state agencies and all of that. So, and the calculation is still done, it's the Title I allocation. So we do have, Kathy, a few districts that really are not eligible, correct?
Yes, this time we have a half a dozen districts that are not eligible for funding through our ESSER.
Right. So, based on the fact that it's done based on their Title I allocation. So we try to be very clear, to your point, exactly what's required and how the calculation is done. And, especially under this fund, this is what we have to still working with the governor's office so folks know kind of what our plans are. Because if there's initiatives that goes on what we have to cover, there's a possibility of having additional funds that may come from other external to the department funding to help support that work.
In terms of your capacity, how do you intend to use the funding to help you in this very demanding time? What are your thoughts on that?
So we're looking at, led by our deputy commissioner, looking at all the capacity internally. We're looking at some durational project managers to bring in, so the duration for the length of the grant can not get into a point of having that cliff at the end or committed to keeping folks beyond that time period. So that's really what we're looking at. So we're assessing right now kind of where we are and what areas of the agency need that additional support to look at that distribution across the board.
And that's most welcome, because I do know that you're understaffed in a very challenging time with, the expectations for what you need to do are very high and demanding expectations. So I'm glad to hear that. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. I miss seeing Kathy, so I'm sorry that we cannot see you, Kathy.
So I think Robert called that.
Yeah.
I guess on the infrastructure, and that's a big deal in DC right now, it's the infrastructure bill, but can some of these dollars be used for infrastructure for, heating, air conditioning, ventilation systems? If we have another pandemic, can it be used for which is like a one-time expense, hopefully, not a ongoing expense, and also the remote learning, the capability of being able to have students, go online either because of the internet access or devices. I know one of the things we learned in the technical high school is we have Chromebooks for all the students. It's a great idea, right? They all got Chromebooks. But right now we've got like a $500,000 line item every year to replace the Chromebooks.
Yeah.
It's not, some of these things have tails to them, which you're going to take into consideration. But, is that something you can use these for? Is that remote learning?
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Yes. These funds can be used for remote learning to purchase technology that's necessary for that. They can also be used for enhancements in your building that would allow for more spacing and for improvements to your HVAC systems. So in order to improve the air quality in the schools.
Great. And go ahead, Justin.
So I just want to add also, one of the reasons that we included the remote piece in the priorities that we put out for ESSER 2 was because we wanted districts and schools to go beyond just purchasing technology. So it's one thing to get those devices, but it's another thing to make sure teachers have the PD that they need.
Right.
Families have the professional development opportunities that they need, and students. And so we want our districts to think about that when they're looking at ESSER $2. It's just not about securing additional technology or plugging any gaps that they may have. It's really about taking it a step further to make sure all of your stakeholders who have that technology know how to use it and providing the TV for them to do that.
And so besides in this new funding, besides the set aside for learning loss, those are still allowable uses for the fund. So districts, they will certainly have, when you look at maybe some infrastructure support that may be one-time spending where you've always wanted to do X, but didn't have the resources to do it, may very well be a place to do that. There is talk about the infrastructure. Discussions that's happening now that there's a full construction piece that may be a part of that, but don't know yet for sure.
This is very helpful. Thank you for also understanding. And I think you were asking, Aaron, if you could have a copy of it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so we'll make the slide. We put these together, but we normally, it's not in your packet, so we'll send it out to you.
That would be down there. Make sure we do that. And any other questions or comments?
All right, keep going. You can go to the next slide. So I think Des is going to give us an update on ESSER 2 and where we are.
So as part of our partnership, and I don't know if Fran is still on, but I want to thank CAS and the work that we do together, is to provide technical assistance administrators. These are experienced retired superintendents that will be accessible to our current superintendents to help them as they plan for not only ESSER 2 dollars, but beyond. With the federal funding that is coming in, those advisors have gotten professional development through CAPS and have been working with superintendents as of, I believe, last week, so that as superintendents are working on their plans at the district level, they have a thought partner. They have someone that they can talk through problems with and problem solve and strategy. These are not folks that work for the department. These are not folks that report to the department. We felt that it was important for there to be a firewall, if you will, so that superintendents have folks who they could work with closely as they build out their application. And on our end, you all remember Dr. Ellen Stokes, who was our receiver for a number of years back in Winchester, so we got her back on board. And she is our liaison, if you will, to CAPS to support this work with the technical assistance advisors. So Kathy and I meet weekly with Fran and have an ongoing dialogue around where we are, what other supports we need to provide so that our technical assistance administrators are able to really help and enhance what superintendents are working on in terms of their application.
That's very good to hear that partnership and working together. That's an excellent example and great. Thank you.
We recognize that there's lots of resources and lots to do, and deployment and execution effectively on the ground is going to be kind of the be-all and end-all for what needs to take place. So this is providing some extra support and a thought partner. As superintendent district, they're still very much engaged in so much that's happening. Just having an outside voice and someone to be there with you as you're doing your planning to bring in maybe sometimes some new thinking around innovation, that will be supported, a support that we wanted to provide for the district.
Very good.
Okay, moving along. The next slide is to follow up. I mentioned earlier about the SDL assessment that we procured. Again, providing to districts at no cost. Going back to the report, the CAPS report, SDL was something, and student well-being is something that is on that report. This is another step that we've taken, and Glenn Peterson has been leading that. Glenn, are you on? You want an update, quick update?
You all set?
We're not hearing you, sir.
Hello, I'm here.
Okay, good.
I muted myself. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Thanks, everyone. My name is Glenn Peterson, as Charlene said. I'm a division director, and maybe there I am. So when Acting Commissioner Russell Tucker was then Deputy Commissioner Russell Tucker, she asked us to find an SEL screener that could be used across the state by districts at no cost. So we began by speaking to leaders of the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which is CASEL, and I'll talk about them briefly later. And we learned that no other states were doing exactly what we wanted to do. So we put out a request for information, or an RFI, last year in the summer to see if some of these testing companies or organizations had the capacity to actually do what we were looking to do, which was provide SEL screener and supplemental assessments for just over 200 school districts and right around 500,000 students. So the RFI went out. We learned that some of these providers did have the capacity, and we followed that up with a request for proposals in the fall. And we went through what I think was a very rigorous process of review and then having presentations by the folks that submitted the RFPs. And we then landed on the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment for several reasons. One is they have a brief screening and then supplemental follow-up assessments. It's strength-based, not deficit-based. They have a robust data tool that, in our estimation, is easy to use for classroom teachers as well as school administrators and district administrators. They have experience in Connecticut, so they kind of know the landscape here. Several districts are already using the DESA, and including the 3 Project Aware districts, and that's a student mental health related grant that the department received a few years ago. And finally, the DESA is aligned to the CASEL 5 competencies. And as I mentioned, CASEL's the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They're really the national leader relating to SEL. And their 5 competencies are social awareness, self-management, relationship skills, I wrote social management twice, and responsible decision-making. So we finalized the contract in mid-March and began planning with the folks from Aperture Education, which is the company that has the DESA, almost immediately following. And so I wanted to first, before we talk about implementation, give you some examples of the type of questions that are on the DESA Mini. If you'll bear with me for a moment, I need to open a file. So the DESA Mini has 2 versions, kind of a elementary K-8 version and a high school version. And the idea is that this scale or this screening can be used by classroom teachers and takes roughly a minute to complete per student. So here are the questions that are on the DESA Mini. And it's let's see, I believe it's a 5-point scale. And all these things are rated in terms of never, rarely, occasionally, frequently, or very frequently. And here are the questions. During the past 4 weeks, how often did the child accept responsibility for what he or she did? Do something nice for somebody. Speak about positive things. Pay attention. Contribute to group efforts. Perform the steps of a task in order. Show care when doing a project or schoolwork. And finally, follow the advice of a trusted adult. And the idea is that this DESA Mini would be given 3 times a year, fall, winter, spring, after, say, like October, for example, after the teachers have been with the student for a month at the beginning of the year, January or February, and then at the end of the year. So those were the more elementary version questions. The high school version is similar, but of course a little bit more sophisticated questions. And again, during the past 4 weeks, how often did the youth show an awareness of his or her personal strengths, stay focused despite a problem or distraction, respect another person's opinion, show concern for someone, work carefully on projects or schoolwork, follow the examples of a positive role model, try to do his or her best, say good things about his or her classmates. So you can see that these are basic soft skill type strengths, things that will build relationships, and as I said, aligned to those CASEL competencies that I mentioned earlier. So the plan for implementation is actually started now. We, meaning internal staff members relating to SEL, are going to have training with Aperture Education next week on Monday afternoon, just so we really get deeply involved and can answer questions from the field. And then the plan for districts is to have 2 cohorts next year and then the following year. And I mean 2 cohorts of districts that will go through the training and to both use the DESA system and understand how the data should be used. And on Monday, through the Superintendent's Digest email, we sent out a flyer to districts that included links to 4 informational sessions. 2 will be later this month, and 2 will be in May for districts to sign up for, of course, and learn more about the DESA and its implementation.
Thank you.
I mentioned 2 cohorts. So the first cohort that will start in the summer and test administration to happen early October will be for up to 25 districts. And then the second cohort to begin late in the fall, with the first test administration to be in February, has room for up to 75 districts. And
So then, thank you so much.
We'll continue to.
All right, thank you, Glenn. I just really wanted folks to get a sense of what that is, and we'll certainly keep you posted as the training is occurring and as we're deploying that. So we're waiting now to hear from the superintendent, which one's going to be certainly on the first round of implementation.
Charlene, I think this would be a good topic for the academic standards and assessment for to have a more in-depth knowledge of the instrument and the results and the implementation. So this is again exciting, and I think that committee will benefit from having that information.
Charlene, I think Glenn said we have districts already using it.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And actually, we were trying to get somebody here today to talk about it, but yes, so we do have some local experience for districts already using it.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes. Thank you.
So that's great. Thank you, Glenn. Ashish, you're up next just to do a quick update of learning models.
Okay, good.
Wasn't that nice to say?
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, members of the State Board of Education.
Good morning.
This slide really just gives a status update of the learning models to date. And this is really data for last week, for the week of March 29th through April 2nd. As you can see, over 70% of our districts, about 197 school districts, over 70% are now operating in a fully in-person, predominantly fully in-person model. And as you can see, and what you have in front of you in this chart is what happened really pretty much for the full year, starting in September 14th, that mid-September week when all of our districts were open, when about a third of our districts met the standard, all the way to this past week when over 70% of our districts are operating in a fully in-person model. And only 2.5% of our districts were predominantly in a fully remote model. That's actually 5 districts. And really, there are only 2 districts that have been operating in a fully remote model and haven't operated in a hybrid or in-person model this year. So almost every district has provided some in-person instruction for our students. And again, every time I do this, we collect the data and report it, but it's really other people in the agency under Deputy Commissioner's leadership and Commissioner's leadership who are really working individually with these districts to support them and encourage them to offer more in-person learning opportunities for our students, and all of the local leaders and community members and educators locally who are doing an unbelievable job so that Connecticut is in this position at this time during the school year.
Thank you. That's very encouraging.
Thank you, Ashish.
Wonderful to say.
Yeah, very encouraging. And the training is upward,
Yeah.
Yeah, great, thanks.
We're really pleased with the work that our districts are doing in this space. So thank you. The next slide, next update, just keeping you posted on the professional learning opportunities that are provided. There's one on the African American, Black, and Puerto Rican Latino studies. And then there was one, I think, last night. I know John was on with SEL for parents and caregivers. And John, how did that go?
Thank you, Commissioner. It was fantastic. We have wonderful partners in the State Education Resource Center, and also we've developed a wonderful partnership with the Connecticut Children's Medical Center. There are a couple of physicians, one in particular, Dr. Robert Ketter, who's a developmental pediatrician who just is a wealth of information and a wonderful rapport with families. And he has the added benefit as being bilingual in Spanish. So last night he did the second installment of self-care and social emotional learning and support for parents, so that parents can support themselves, can be in a good place to support their families. We speak to it as putting your oxygen mask on first before you can care for others. So we did that entire, we've done a series of 8 of these now. We did that both entirely in Spanish and entirely in English. Last night was the English one. And I'll just share with you a couple of comments from the chat. The interesting thing that's also happening in the chat is parents and caregivers are helping each other in the chat. They're answering each other's questions. They're offering guidance. They're saying, this worked for me. You should do this. So that's a fantastic community that's happening outside of our experts. But a couple of the comments from parents who attended said, I love this webinar. I'm feeling better already. I was stressed coming in and I feel so much better. Another one said, this webinar is amazing. I'm learning so much. So we're going to continue with those partnerships and continue to reach out and provide supports directly to families, as we know they continue to have challenges with supporting their students. So thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, John. Just wanted folks to know that we are indeed reaching out directly to families as well, and a great part of what we're doing. The next slide is just a shout out to, again, the work that's happening. The turnaround office is again brought together in districts to highlight strategies from the field. And that's a picture of them on screen in their virtual space and environment. So shout out, I know we recognize Lisa Lomenzo there and our other colleagues. Thank you very much. Next slide. Again, we've presented, Irene Parisi has presented at the Comprehensive Center network work, again, on the ecosystem of support for teaching and learning during a period of rapid transformation. So thank you, Irene, for doing that. And next slide. And I know Dr. Tucker is on, but first annual statewide Educators Rising Conference. And I'm going to give her a second just to do her shout out and thanks to all those who were a part of it. Dr. Tucker?
Thank you so much, Commissioner Russell Tucker. I just want to say thanks to Commissioner Tucker, Deputy Commissioner Nesmith, and everyone for your support. As you know, we launched our statewide Ed Rising, which is a grow your own model here in Connecticut in September of 2020. We held our first conference last week. We had over 581 conference participants, which was almost triple the amount that we planned. We had breakout sessions, we had Kahoot sessions, panel discussions for the students, and student competitions. And as a result, we will now send 10 students who will participate in the National Educators Rising Conference, which was scheduled to be in Orlando. It will now be virtual this year. But we are proud to send 10 students from Connecticut. We had just overwhelming support. We thank all of our experts and our members who brought greetings to our students to encourage them to pursue the field of education. And this could not have been done without our sponsors who are listed here on the slide. But I have to give a special shout out to CCSU, Dr. Toro and Dr. Kim Costellas. Without their support, they provided the virtual platform for us to conduct this meeting and it was unlimited space for everyone to be able to join and participate. They handed over their IT staff to us and said, make it happen. And so we're most appreciative for their support and the support of all who made this a reality for us within a 6-month window for our students. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. And the last update, thank you, G, just go right back to the very beginning. Chris Soto is on. And so, Chris, if you can just do very, very high level highlight of Accelerate CT Education Task Force, and then that will be the end of our update, agency update.
Great. Well, good morning to our board members. Thank you, Commissioner. I just want to give a brief overview of the Accelerate CT Education Task Force. This was spawned out of the effort to support districts as they thought about ESSER II funding and how we could support them as an agency. And so we looked at those 4 priority areas that we had put out as guidance. Those are the first 4 that you see bulleted here. And so, and with the goal to basically identify these strategies and practices that are going to position students best during COVID and beyond. Then, if you remember, there was another round of funding that was approved, and that's called ARP ESSER. And with that was a specific carve out for summer enrichment. Again, just to remind you, the districts could use their ESSER II funding for summer enrichment. So this new round of funding, we thought it was important to really highlight summer enrichment and get a subgroup for that. So what has happened since is that these groups have met. We've convened over 100 stakeholders. We've had meetings. We've gotten feedback. And then the goal is essentially to release an anchor document that kind of talks about the way we approach acceleration for students. And these subgroups will essentially have companion documents that are available on the website that incorporate all the strategies from the groups and the discussions that were happening. Happening in parallel is our effort to figure out, in coordination with the Office of the Governor, how we make this summer the best summer ever for students, right? As we roll off the end of the school year. So we're working on that. Again, the anchor document will be out soon. We'll also release that with guidance around summer enrichment. And the summer enrichment is really focused on community programs that provide summer opportunities for students. And, looking at a holistic approach so that way they can braid other funding, particularly what districts are doing or even philanthropic funding. So that is a brief update, again, of the task force, the work that we've done, and what's ahead.
Thank you very much, Chris. And that is the agency update. I know a lot, but wanted to very, very solid. Yes, Mark.
It's just a question for the summer timeline. When are the programs going to get released, from the districts and the towns to the families so that they're aware and need to make their plans, especially working parents? Summer is 10 weeks of what is my child going to do every week?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sure. That's a great question. Again, the reason why this is working in parallel with the stuff that's happening around the other subgroups is exactly what you said. Districts, community providers, parents, families need to know what's happening. And so not only do we plan to get that guidance out, hopefully next week, to our communities, but also thinking about the ways that we can proactively, through marketing, encourage families and community providers to take advantage of this opportunity. We don't want any stone to go unturned, and we're working with the RESCs, the Regional Educational Service Centers, to also help because they know their regional communities, and we're working with a bunch of other partners on that outside of the educational space.
And our goal, Martha, is for this summer that learning is taking place every day, everywhere, wherever kids are. And some of our districts are also building in enrichment activities as a part of their efforts as well. I've heard some districts who said we've surveyed our parents and we know what they're looking for, and so that's a part of their planning that will be incorporated in their application. So as Chris mentioned, a lot of this is, your libraries, your Boys and Girls Club, your museums, your cultural center, to be able to say, let's build programs or expand programs that can complement what's happening. So for the day, that families have access to a continuum of support throughout the day.
That's wonderful. No, it's just unfortunately you guys have that very short time period to work in it. Especially, it sounds like it's been wonderful.
I participate in task force in the academic area, and it's very well done, very concrete, very action-oriented, really something in itself very good about how they're being done and addressed. And, quickly, because you have to sense of urgency. Any other questions regarding the agency? Gentlemen, I think we truly appreciate there's so much going on that part of what we need to ensure is that we're all informed because, there's so many questions and misinformation out there. So the more we have clarity and all the work that is being done is more important. So we appreciate you taking the time to explain to us and to inform us of everything. So thank you again. Thanks, Chris. Okay, the committee reports, I believe academic and standards and assessment has not met. I think they're scheduled to meet in next week or in 2 weeks from now. Accountability and support will not meet in March. We're not going to meet in April either. So that's a welcome news. Finance and audit has not met. And then we do have legislators and policy who meet every time. And we have a substantive agenda. So share with us what you've been doing.
All right. This morning we met right before our meeting now, and we had 2 updates. Our first was from John Fassinelli over the Healthy Balanced Living curriculum. Gave us an update on the framework of that. The full board will be seeing that at the June meeting. We will get another update next month, and then the full board will see it for approval. Some board members remember the document. We've seen it before, and it was a very good update that was given to us by John, and we'll get some more of that next month as well. Our second update was from Laura, who hasn't been busy at all. She gave us, what she's been doing, obviously what she's been doing. We've been updated by her, continuously about the bills, which ones she's looking at, the serious ones, meeting with different committees and so forth. So we'll get those continuous updates. It was good to hear that. There's a lot of discussions going on with the agency, which is so good, and just so was in part of that as well. It was good for the committee to hear that these are discussions going on and not just CapEx. I still say across the street. We started to say across the street, but capital isn't across the street anymore from us. But that they're going on using the folks here that need to be part of those discussions. Always did. So those are the 2 updates we had this morning.
Thank you, Erin. And I appreciate you're always on top of issues and ensuring that we are as a board moving ahead in terms of addressing those issues. So
we're led by Jeff. This is wonderful, keeping us informed and updated.
Thank you. And today I recognized her because she had her hair. At the airport, they make you take your mask off because you give them a photo so they want to see.
I think Mr. Wibby is, Superintendent Wibby is making a little bit of an update. He should be on the.
And Bob, how much money are the technical high school going to get from Acer and the ARP and all that?
I'm not sure of the exact number, but it is reasonable. It's a lot of money.
For ESSER 2, you got 12 million.
Yeah.
But who's counting?
It's like.
Can we throw out any school to you and you'll know it's that fast?
Oh my God.
Well, you can spread it out.
Well, when you spread it out, it's not that much money.
That's good. There it is.
Hi, Superintendent.
Good morning.
You're on.
Morning, Commissioner, Madam Chairwoman, Chairman Trefry. Briefly, just have 3 points to share with you regarding the Technical Education and Career System Board meeting for last month. We're gearing up and planning for a full reopening of all of our schools coming in May. We've had a committee that's been working since January. We call it the committee, but my principals affectionately call it the Back to the Future. They did a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of what we need to be thinking about for reopening. Part of the planning includes the development of student support strategies to implement immediately as soon as the kids are all coming back and also the summer and into the next fall and beyond. Some of the things that we're going to be doing right away are social and emotional learning advisories for all of our ninth graders across the entire state. They're going to get an extra permanent and purposeful SEL meeting period all the time. We're going to be working on trade remediation over the summer. And that's even for our kids who are graduating. I'm really happy that we're going to be graduating here. We're also going to have trade remediation for them starting as early as this summer. We'll be working on academic recovery, enrichment, streamlining communications to our families as well. Just a quick update on our enrollment process. First of all, we want to thank Director Cecilia from the Department of Ed for all of the help that the rest of our folks have for our enrollment process. We're happy to report to you that we're currently a little above 95% enrolled for next year's freshman class. Being 100% enrolled in the fall. Again, our equity numbers are looking great. Our special education offers are already above 17% for next year. And we've actually seen with our new enrollment process growth in our EL population. There was a nice article in the Meredith Record Journal this week showing that we've quadrupled both our applicants and our offers to EL students in Maryland. So we're keeping a close eye on that. We're enrolling for our new career academy at Vinyl Tech in Middletown for fall. And we're going to be offering trades of HVAC and manufacturing to students outside the technical system. So 11th and 12th graders that go to LEA high schools can come in the afternoon to Vinyl Tech to supplement their high school education there with us at the technical high schools. And we'll be also moving that to Grasso Tech as well. So we're excited about that on the heels of our positive opening in Meriden earlier in the technical board update.
Thanks, Jim. That's really part of the overall plan of having these schools open most of the day and into the evening, so that you can get as many students through as you can, both the full-time students as well as part-time students.
Right, and so that's wonderful news. And also just to expose more kids to it. Yeah. They may not go into HVAC, but maybe it's going to spur electrical engineering a path for them.
Yeah, and it's just, it's a way to get their hands on.
Absolutely.
I know I've talked to some employers that aren't really, they may be in manufacturing, but they'll hire a kid out of the electrical shop because they know they can learn the other. So that is very helpful. Commissioner Russell Tucker just slipped me a note. I guess it's 28.5 million. I will also say that it's no bias towards these schools. As they say, it's need-based. And in all 17, with the exception of one of the 17 technical high schools, they are all physically located in an alliance district.
Right.
These are not, and that makes a difference. It's symbolic of the profile of the students we get, and they do extremely well. It's a way to lift them up.
I'm delighted to know that you're getting the resources. I know you need them, so I'm delighted to know. That's why I asked. So that's good news. We need a lot of good news. Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Superintendent Woody. Thank you so much. I asked Woody to provide a brief summary of the NASP meeting. And before you start, I forgot to mention that one of the things Adam Taylor has done, he was the president of NASP in 2011. Mm-hmm. And then 2 years later, I think NASP recognized him with one of their awards, Michigan Awards. So we are being part of NASP and actively participating. And I'm glad Woody and some of the other board members continue to be present and learn from the experts. I know Erin attends the meetings, and Awilda was also in that meeting that you're going to summarize. So Woody, please go ahead.
Yes, okay. As I said, Aaron and Awilda and I attended the NASB Legislative Conference. And we sent a report out to all of you, but just to mention a few highlights. Some of the state boards have formed equity committees and have created equity roadmaps to keep equity at the forefront of everything that they do. And so I'm doing more research on that to learn more about it, but that's an interesting initiative. And it was said that with the infusion of federal funds from the American Rescue Plan, that if we don't have something to show for it, it will set back the cause of fiscal equity. So there's pressure on the school districts to really use these funds to make a difference. And the NASB government relations consultant said that state boards should advocate directly to their congressional delegations and to this U.S. Department of Education. So I'm looking forward to learning more about what we do in that regard. And finally, there was a student board member who made the remark. She said, having a seat at the table doesn't mean that you are heard. And so she advocated that the student board members should be able to vote. And so that may be something that we should consider within the legal and bylaw frameworks. So those are some of the highlights that I thought were interesting.
Thank you. I think, Woody, our experience has been that when we have strong students in the board, we listen to them and they influence the results of the conversation and what we're trying to approve. So I do think that they may not be able to vote, but they have an influencing role in the board. Thank you. And,
actually, we really do listen to the student board members, and they made a big contribution over the past year.
Right. Thank you. Erin, sir, anything?
Just an update on a grant that was applied for. It's the Kellogg Foundation grant for Racial Equity 2030 that Dirk applied for. I believe it's been almost a year now. They had this been moved to the next phase, so that was sort of some positive information that Ingrid shared with the board yesterday. So fingers crossed. It's a big grant that they were very excited to be moved, and so one step closer.
Excellent. That's good news. I'm just gonna say something off the top of my head. Equity is now being used so often that I think some people do not quite understand what it means. And I hope that we can use it and define it in the appropriate way. Because it's being thrown equity, I'm not sure people understand in terms of, I know when we adopted it, it was not that common a term, and we were very intentional in adopting it and trying to be true to what it means and so on and so forth. So I'm not cautioning so much the board, I'm cautioning myself to ensure that whenever I hear that word, I can ensure that it's being used appropriately. But in the plan, I hope we also use equity in terms of expecting the results that support the equity. And again, I want to thank all of you. It's so wonderful to see my fellow board members, see you guys here. So thank you so much to see you through technology, to know that you're healthy, and to thank Charlene, her team, to look at Desi, Jessa, Laura, who has to run to the head of to handle 4,000 more. And Alice is always in track for being on top of everything and helping. So thank you again. I do look forward to one of these days having lunch together. I do miss those wonderful sandwiches.
That was the cookie.
I know.
It's the cookie.
What is the cookie? Anyway, thank you. And have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't have to ask for a motion to. I have to ask for a motion to. I know I was saying that I have to ask for a motion. No.
Thank you. Is it on mute now? Okay.
What's the status of, remote?
I